This is the Saturday edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I'm ready for you today.
Oh, I doubt that. Sean, our Saturday show is all about the two of us nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. And look, if you missed last week we made a change. We brought an independent adjudicator in. Well, I thought he was independent, but then he came so heavily down on the side of Sean Aylmer that I do have to question the integrity. But that's probably not the best way to start. Adam Lang, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Can you just forget what I said about your integrity and assess these stories based on their merit and just based on who you think is a nice guy?
Sure thing. Look, the wound is healed, but the scar remains.
Well, last week it was a 3-1 victory for Sean. That is a wound that will never heal. So I'm going to recover. Sean, would you like to go first for the biggest story this week?
No. I would hate to change the way that we, formatted. You're off and running. You're talking non-stop at the moment. Go for it.
Fine, I will. The biggest story this week, and you know what? You can actually just retire if you want from the whole podcast because I've got this wrapped up. The biggest story this week is the plan to regulate crypto trading in Australia. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it might not sound like the biggest story in the world, but it is the biggest story of the week because we're not just talking about cryptocurrency, really. It's more the whole kind of ecosystem around it. So licensing for the exchanges and brokers and all that kind of thing. And the reason it's so important is because the government's really focused on protecting consumers, but also about making the most of the blockchain technology that really underpins the whole system, underpins crypto and the whole lot. It's accurate, it's secure, and it could be used for so much more than just digital currencies and selling digital artworks. And that's what this is all about. It's about unlocking the potential of the technology. So really, Adam, I've chosen this story not because it's the flashiest or the most exciting story of the week, and Sean will probably go for something like that. But out of everything that's happened this week, this could have the biggest long-term impact on financial systems and technology in Australia. So that is why this is the biggest story of the week.
Good effort. I'm going to throw in a little bit. I'm going to add to your argument here, which I hate doing. But also remember, ANZ Bank created a stable coin which is pegged to the Aussie dollar. Effectively, that reduces the risk of buying digital assets. It's the first time a major bank has created a stable coin, and that certainly is encouraging more customers towards crypto. So I get that's a big story. However, it ain't the biggest story. The biggest story this week by far, and you have to bear with me a little bit, is COVID. Now, Michael, 2 weeks ago you said COVID was the sleeper story. Last week you said it's the most remarkable story. Tell you why it's the biggest story right now. The case numbers are rising. 99% of cases are Omicron. 2/3 or so are the most recent variant of Omicron. In New South Wales, and the daily case numbers are in their 20s. Victoria's around 10,000. South Australia's heading towards 8,000. Queensland's more than that. The ACT and Tasmania, 1,000 to 2,000. Western Australia's on the rise. Why it's the biggest story? It's because we're not talking about it like we were. We're now living with COVID. This week marks a turning point. We're not scared of COVID anymore, even though the case numbers are going through the roof. We're not introducing restrictions. There are no lockdowns. Sure, we have to be careful. In South Australia, some non-elective surgery was cancelled, right? But if that's all COVID is doing to us now, this is a point in time in which COVID and the fear of COVID is over. We still will have COVID. We'll have it for years. But the whole grip on our lives finished this week. Big story of the week. What do you reckon, Adam?
You are claiming the story that was pretty much word for word what I said last week. The fact that we are learning to live with COVID. You know what? I'm not going to put an asterisk on your victory until you've actually got a victory. So, Adam, who won the biggest story of the week?
Okay, well, I think in part, Michael, you've answered with your response, but the fact that this has been a while, the biggest turning point for this story for me was when WA opened the border again, and that was some time ago. So I think we are living with COVID. I think that's true. But I think this week's biggest story in Australia is us actually bringing on the crypto trading regulation. That is a big step, and it's an international step, so I love it. That's my biggest story for the week.
1-0 to Michael. Fair enough.
Let's move on to the most remarkable story.
Michael, go for it.
The most remarkable story for me this week is what's happening with coal miners at the moment. And a slightly unusual choice, I think, probably for most remarkable, but I will explain why. A lot of investors are obviously shifting away from assets that don't align with their values, the whole concept of ethical investing. And for many, that really includes coal because of its environmental impact. But anyone who is sticking with coal would be celebrating at the moment because soaring coal prices mean companies like New Hope are turning out massive profits. So New Hope this week reported a $330 million profit, not a bad turnaround from a $50 million loss the previous year. And coal prices have gone up even more since that profit was earned. I just think it's pretty remarkable that a commodity that's really become so unpopular still has such strong demand and will continue to do so until the transition to renewables is more advanced.
Supply and demand is not remarkable. Coal prices go up, they go down. You know how it is.
Now, Sean, can I ask you just to stop trying to sway the judge and get to your story, please?
Hold on. You're pulling me up, Adamski.
Thank you, Adam. I've never questioned your integrity. Thank you for all that you do.
Anyway, my most remarkable story is really the casino sector. Let's start with the Star Group this week. There's an inquiry going on into whether it's fit to hold a gaming license. What do we find out this week? Well, it was dealing with an individual linked to triad gangs in China. And the Star knew about it because the group's manager of due diligence and intelligence had previously worked at the Hong Kong Jockey Club. He told management about it and they ignored it for 3 months. Quite incredible. Also, we found that Star Entertainment Group's Sydney Casino gave a known high roller who is being investigated by the tax office a $5 million credit in exchange for a blank cheque. There was a 30-day payback period, a blank cheque. And CEO Matt Beckier, that's the CEO of Star, didn't really like the KPMG report, which was critical of Star. He said it was unacceptable and wrong in an audit committee meeting. We also found out the Star Group disguised as hotel expenses some $900 million in transactions linked to Chinese high rollers to help them circumvent rules and access cash to gaming. And at the end of the week, Crown Resorts, it escaped having its license for its Perth casino cancelled. However, it will, just like its casino in Melbourne, it faces heavy oversight and tough penalties for any future legal breaches after the Western Australian Royal Commission found that it was unfit to operate the business. Wow, what a remarkable week all round, but especially for casinos.
Adam, what do you think?
Well, look, I guess the confluence of ethical investing and the coal prices is interesting in its context.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, don't you reckon? You know, when Adam starts with your story, you know you've lost.
Yeah.
I'll have to change tactics. Okay, so the casino stories from this week, because it's been all about Crown for so long and that Star was sitting okay, but it's just been smashed. And the layers to this story are immense. So I think that has to win for the remarkable story of the week.
Yeah, well done, Sean. That was definitely the winner out of those two. We'll be back in a moment with the sleeper story of the week. All right, Sean, we're looking for the sleeper story of the week. So the story that might not be getting the attention that it deserves or that is probably going to become a much bigger story further down the track. What was it for you?
The South Australian election last weekend, Labor defeated the sitting coalition government. Former Premier Stephen Marshall resigned. The Libs were well and truly smacked. Now, why is it the sleeper? Because it didn't get anywhere near the attention it should have, given it's the first time a state leader has lost an election since COVID began. Think of Western Australia. That was an absolute schmozzle for the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party only have 2 seats in Western Australia. The Queensland incumbent government won. The Tasmanian incumbent government won. South Australia were kicked out. We've got a federal poll in 6 weeks' time. Most of us didn't take much notice at the South Australian election. I guarantee you every politician in Canberra did, though. It shows that the coalition in Canberra is not safe.
Well, that's a pretty good sleeper story. I don't know how a story that affects 1.7 million people in one particular state could be considered a sleeper because it seems pretty big. But you know what? I'm not going to quibble.
You weren't listening.
I listened. I listened, and I also think that it's been canvassed fairly extensively at a federal level. But you know what? It's not my job to declare myself the winner. That is Adam's job, and I'm sure he'll do that in just a moment, because the sleeper story for me this week probably isn't a sleeper story in the traditional sense, especially not for anyone working in finance or paying attention really to what's happening in bond markets. But I think it is a sleeper story for the broader population that may not realize the exposure they have to bonds in their super funds. So bond markets are obviously more sensitive to interest rate changes. The main global index, which is used to measure the performance of bonds, has fallen 11% from its high a year ago. So we found that figure out this week. That's the biggest drop in at least 3 decades. We all pretty much hold bonds in our super, and an average drop of 11% is a big whack. Now, if that had happened to equities, it would be all over the place. But because it's bonds and perhaps a little less glamorous, a little harder to explain, say, on the 6 p.m. news, well, I think it fits into the sleeper story category. Adam, what do you reckon? I know Sean's going to have objections because this has been a very big story, but I think enough people wouldn't be aware of the impact on their super balances that it probably does qualify quite nicely as a sleeper. What do you think?
Adam, before you go, can I just point something out? We're a business podcast, and just because we have people who have no idea about business, like Michael, suddenly getting interested in bond markets, most of our listeners know what's been going on in bond markets.
Most of our listeners know the significance of the South Australian election as well, Sean, so I don't think we can measure it on that.
So over to me now. And Sean, as you brought up WA, I'll reference the great commentator Dennis Cometti, who used an expression called centimetre perfect to land something absolutely perfectly. So I think for a centimetre perfect definition of the sleeper story, the bonds have it. It is something that kind of exists ephemerally in the background much of the time, bonds, but its impact is immense. Whereas I actually do think the South Australian election did get covered pretty well. So I'm giving this one to Michael for the win.
I am absolutely astounded, Adam, that someone of your intellect reckons that the bond market hasn't had much coverage.
So what, when praise doesn't win, you just criticise the judge. I accept it. It is my role here. The score so far is 2 Michael, Sean 1.
I think it's starting to look foolish. Anyway, go on to your favourite story, Michael. I want to hear about it.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, Adam. Keep it up. For the favourite story of the week, I think you can't go past the list of Australia's richest 250 people. This was in the Australian newspaper. The stats are just incredible. 131 billionaires on the list, and across the 250 people, the average wealth is more than $2 billion. Property is the main source of wealth, but considering commodity prices, it's no surprise that Gina Rinehart and Andrew Forrest are numbers 1 and 2 with around $32 billion each. But the thing that gets me is that it's not just old money. There are a lot of people making their fortunes from technology, like the founders of Canva with $16 billion. Or this story, I love this one about Sam Prince, who started the Mexican restaurant chain Sombrero. He's one of 29 new names on the list this year. That is pretty incredible, the fact that there's 250 richest people, and of those 250 people, 29 of them weren't even on the list last year. What that says to me, Adam, is that there is hope for any of us, that one day we might too end up on the list of Australia's richest 250 people. And if I know anything about Adam Lang, it's that you like a story that's got some real aspirational, inspiring qualities.
Michael, you're going to lose points as deductions for buttering up soon. So just can I ask you to limit your flattery?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Over to you, Sean.
Look, I totally agree with Michael. I mean, I think the rich list is fantastic every year. I mean, I don't have a story that I favour over that one at all.
You're just conceding defeat.
Yeah, I don't mind. Look, the interview we did with John Stensholt, who puts the list together and has put it together for the BRW and then the Financial Review and now the Australian for 15 years, his knowledge on rich listers and his sort of personal relationships with so many of the 250 is beyond anyone else in the country. So that interview, which ran on Friday, is really worthwhile going back. He talks about going on to Clive Palmer's super yacht and having a chat to him, and just a great story. I can't argue with you on that one, Michael. I'm happy to concede 2.5, 1.5 loss to me this week.
Look, I'm going to take the victory, but I think it should be 3-1. I mean,
where's the half?
Yeah, you can't just piggyback off my story and claim half a point for it.
I think you forfeited, Sean.
You can have it, Michael. 3-1. You win.
Wow, that's rather poetic, isn't it? In the second week of my adjudication, Michael, you win with 3 points, Sean with 1.
Do you know what I like about Adamski? Adamski, I like it when you actually don't fight with Michael. He doesn't know how to handle it. So it's kind of like the old Monty Python skit.
Don't you want to haggle?
Don't you want to haggle? So Michael, you just say, yeah, you agree. Good work, Michael. And he's like,
wait a second. Don't you want to argue with me?
That's not the way it goes.
Well, you know what? Look, I'm in a very good mood now because I went into this expecting to be up against the judge, to be up against you, Sean, and in the end, everyone's on my side. So we're ending in a pretty good place.
Yeah, but Michael, there was a bit of a Stephen Bradbury moment there at the last stand where Sean just conceded and you won.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I had it wrapped up anyway. You know what? 3-1. I'm not going to question how we got there because in the end, the right decision was made. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Adam, for your decision.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Sean.
And don't forget that tomorrow the three of us will all be back again to have a bit of a lighter look at some of the news around the place. It is our weekly podcast called Safe Word. Do not miss it. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a good Saturday and a great weekend.